From the late 1960s to the early 1990s, the United States saw an unprecedented surge in serial killing, rooted not just in the dynamic changes of the post-war period, but in the development of the human psyche, going back many millennia to our ancient past. Wonder why serial killers exist, why they emerged, and why they exploded in the post-war United States? Check out The Golden Age of Murder, a panoramic look at serial killing focusing on the United States in the post-war period, with your hosts, Toby and Simeon.
You're listening to The Murder in My Family, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including Missing Persons, DNA ID, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford. In this episode, we'll be discussing the case of a 23-year-old Alabama woman who was murdered on a road trip helping someone she thought was her friend. Her reward for helping this friend was a bullet to the head while she slept, before her body was stuffed into a suitcase and discarded. We'll dive into this case after some quick housekeeping. Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this show, please take a minute to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam. Or you can find us on Facebook by searching for The Murder in My Family. And you can also listen to the show for free on the Spreaker app, and even interact with me by commenting on episodes that I can read and respond to your comments. If you'd like to help support this show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Murder in My Family. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon may include early and ad-free episodes of the show, or bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include stickers, thank you cards, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/The Murder in My Family. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank you to all of the supporters that help keep the show growing and improving. One last note. Please consider supporting any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family, the way that those sponsors support the show. It's with our sponsor support that this show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you. And now on with the show. Laramie Cline was born on October 25th, 1993, to Derek and Kim Cline. She has a brother, Coulter, and a sister, Jackie. In 2002, she graduated from Carroll County High School in Ozark, Alabama. Growing up, Laramie loved working with animals and enjoyed spending time on the beach, but most of all, she loved her family. Despite her connection to her family, Laramie was an energetic young lady who had a strong desire to travel and see the world, and she was outgoing and friendly. And in 2017, she was working in the food industry in Orange Beach, Alabama. It was Laramie's friendly personality that attracted people to her, and sadly, it may be what ultimately brought her into contact with the man that murdered her. The last time Kim Cline saw her daughter Laramie, their visit ended with a hug and a kiss. It was August 7, 2017, and Laramie and her mom were standing in the parking lot of Kimberly's workplace. It was a nice visit for the pair, and they said their goodbyes with a hug and a kiss. Laramie was getting ready for a road trip from her home in Alabama to Colorado. As Kim described to AL.com, she was always up for an adventure. As for Kim, she was going in to have a surgical procedure on her back and would be out of commission. Kim and Laramie were very close and had one of those special mother-daughter best friend pairings. And Kim remembers when she said goodbye to her 23-year-old daughter. She warned her, "Be careful on her trip." And Laramie responded, "Of course I will, Mama." When the two parted, they expected to see each other in a few weeks like they usually would. But that would never happen. After their goodbyes, Laramie headed to Weld County, Colorado, and Kim completed her back surgery, which went well. Every day for 3 days after the surgery, Laramie called or texted her mom to check in to see how she was doing. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Laramie checked in on her mom. But by Sunday, Kim was very worried. She hadn't heard from Laramie in a couple days. While Laramie was a young woman on a trip, probably busy, that might just mean that she had lost track of time. But to Kim, it wasn't like Laramie to stay out of touch. And as we know, that all too often, when a woman on a trip doesn't call home, it's sometimes a huge warning sign that something's wrong. Kim and her family didn't wait around. That same Sunday, after no word from Laramie on Friday or Saturday, they went to the Dale County Sheriff's Office and filed a missing persons report for Laramie. Meanwhile, that very same day, a woman's body was found about 15 miles northeast of Little Rock, Arkansas, near Lake Pickthorn. But it would take days for an identification. The woman's body had been stuffed into a suitcase before being left where it was later discovered. Finally, after an autopsy was completed, it was confirmed that the body found near Lake Pickthorn was Laramie Cline's. Laramie had been shot once in the head. It didn't take long for police to start looking for 24-year-old David Houston Harvey, who had worked with Laramie in Orange Beach, Alabama. He had been on the road trip with Laramie before she vanished. Harvey was arrested soon after. Harvey was arrested in relation to Laramie's murder soon after. He was initially only charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence because of the way that he left Laramie's body, but he wasn't charged directly with her death. This is because investigators believe she was killed in a different state, but her body was left in Arkansas. This created a little bit of a jurisdictional problem for police. Houston Harvey pleaded not guilty, and his trial was set for June 22, 2018. But just before trial came, David Houston Harvey pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal with prosecutors, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Houston Harvey admitted traveling to Colorado from Alabama with Laramie. He claimed that on August 10th or 11th, Laramie pointed a gun at him and tried to rob him. And when they were headed down Interstate 25 from Wyoming to Colorado, they ended up struggling over control of Laramie's gun. And according to him, it went off killing Laramie. Apparently, though, Houston Harvey wanted to end the trip early and go home, but Laramie wanted to continue en route to Colorado. But Houston Harvey later told his girlfriend, Samantha, a different story, one in which Laramie was asleep and he shot her to death. There was no real rhyme or reason to it, and it certainly wasn't self-defense. He couldn't find her pulse after he shot her in the head, so he pulled over, and then instead of calling for any kind of help, he decided to shove her into a suitcase, which he put into the trunk of Laramie's car. He drove all the way to Arkansas with Laramie's body in the trunk. Once there, he dropped off the suitcase and got rid of Laramie's gun. He kept driving Laramie's car around. In fact, when he was located by police on August 20th, he was pulled over in her car. Colorado prosecutors charged David Houston Harvey with robbery, auto theft, and first-degree murder and second-degree murder. And David Houston Harvey pleaded guilty as part of another plea deal and was sentenced to 35 years in prison for the second-degree murder of Laramie Cline. It's unclear why Houston Harvey, who was driving, was even holding a gun pointed toward Laramie, who was asleep. But his robbery story makes no sense to those who knew Laramie. It's not something she would do. Kim said that her daughter was just too trusting of people, and she thought the best of everyone. She didn't always see the dangers they might present. Despite the fact Laramie's remains were found and her killer sent to prison, it hasn't been of much comfort to her family and friends. They feel that the world was robbed of a good person with a lot to offer people, and the last 5 years have been difficult to say the least. Laramie's mom, Kim, joined me to discuss her daughter's tragic case and what her loss has done to her world. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. Hi, Kim, and thank you for coming on The Murder of My Family to share your daughter Laramie's story with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You were originally reached out to me to cover Laramie's case a few years back. I think it was only about 10 months after she had been taken from you. But there were some developments and some court proceedings and stuff, and you decided that it would be probably better to hold off until all of that was over with and played out. So here we are now talking about this ordeal that you've been through. How are you doing today now that this is this chapter at least is behind you?
Well, I'm doing a lot better. I still miss Laramie every day. And today just happens to be my birthday, and so it makes it rough on days like today, because she was always doing something for me for my birthday, making it so special. So today's a hard day, but most days are good.
Yeah. Well, happy birthday, and I can imagine that birthdays, holidays, the stuff like that has to be especially difficult for you.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. It's coming up on 5 years since Laramie, who's 23, was taken from you. With that anniversary approaching, do you find yourself thinking more about Laramie or what happened to her with that milestone coming up?
I do. The month of August is especially rough. But yeah, and just, wow, 5 years, how in the world is that possible? So I do think more about her in the coming months.
And before we get into the details of what happened and who was responsible and what the outcome was, can you tell us a little bit about Laramie herself and help us get to know who she was, a little bit about her life and the kind of person she was?
Oh, sure. She was born October 25th, 1993. We lived in a little town called Piedmont, and so she was born at Jacksonville Hospital. She was breech, so I had to have a C-section, and we finally got able to joke about it. But when the doctor cut me, he actually cut Laramie's right butt cheek. She didn't have to have stitches, but she did end up with a scar, and that scar, grew along with her as she got older. So, like I said, we did joke about you got your birthmark at birth. She was always just such a sweet girl. I've talked with mothers of her friends, and nobody has ever had a bad word to say about Laramie. She was always so sweet. She was kind to everybody. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. She was raised like that. Please, thank you. She, wouldn't go in anybody's refrigerator without asking, even though her nanny would tell her, just get what you want. She still wouldn't. Now, at my mother's house, she would. She felt much more comfortable at Mama's house, though, just going in and getting what she wanted. She made good grades in elementary and middle school, had friends. She would go spend the night. She had one particular friend she would go spend the night with when we lived in Piedmont, and that girl would come to our house. One year we had a Halloween-themed birthday party for her, and several of her friends came, and they all wore their costumes, and it was real cute. She never met a stranger. We moved to Ozark, and so she had to change schools in middle school, but she was able to make friends there. And again, we would have girls over, and she would go to their house. So she's just always been very outgoing. Spring break of 2011, she got to go to Hawaii because her best friend had moved over there for her dad's job. And so Laramie got to spend a week over there with them and seeing the sights of Hawaii. Her plane ticket was her Christmas present that year. And so she loved that. Now I'm so glad that she got to experience that. Funny story happened over there. She was 17 when she went, and her best friend wanted to get their belly buttons pierced. So, of course, she had to have permission. She called, and I told her it'd be okay. So her friend's dad took them to get this done, and evidently it hurt, and she started cussing. And so that was the first time her friend's dad had ever heard her cuss. And she apologized, but he thought it was so funny. And then she graduated in 2012, started off going to college in Troy, which is about 45 minutes from here, moved up there with her best friend. That didn't work out for her. So she came back home. My friends were her friends, basically. I mean, she had her own friends, but a lot of my friends were also her friends because they just loved her. She was always around. I worked at DHR at the time, and I was in foster care. And so every year we would have a foster children's Christmas party, and she would come and help out. She'd be Santa's helper. My supervisor at the time just loved her so much. They had a real close relationship. And like I said, she had a close relationship with several of my friends. She went to work at a Subway that was in a convenience store, and met one of her good friends, Deborah, and her husband, Stanford. They became very good friends with Laramie. Laramie actually stayed with them for a while. She decided she didn't like the rules at home as she got older, because even though she was an adult at this point, I still had rules. And so she moved in with them for a while. And then she moved from the Subway actually over into the convenience store and worked there for a while. Always very friendly, always. Customers loved her, just that bubbly personality that she had. She ended up, she moved to Enterprise with her friends Miranda and Jerry. Miranda was more like a sister to her than anything. And they had a very close relationship. So it's been hard on her as well. In May of 2017, her dad had some family members living in Orange Beach. And this is all in Alabama, by the way, I'm sorry. Orange Beach, Alabama. And she couldn't find a job around here. So she went down there with her cousin and her aunt, and she found a job down there. And so she moved to Orange Beach. And that was Laramie's happy place, was the beach anyway. She loved going to Panama City Beach, Florida. She'd go there. We'd go there. We'd go to different beaches in Florida. So, I mean, that was her truly happy place, was being on the beach.
Sounds like she was a typical young person that liked to hang out with her friends, going to the beach. Everything seemed pretty typical.
Yes.
You mentioned she went on a trip to Hawaii. What brought her to Colorado in 2017?
She, and I don't say his name very often. I usually refer to him as POS, honestly, because I just can't stand saying his name. But anyway, his name is David Houston Harvey. He and Laramie worked together at the Barefoot Island Grill there in Orange Beach, along with his girlfriend, Samantha. And Laramie and Samantha had become friends. They had an off day, went down to Pensacola, Florida, went to a strip club, actually. And then there was some sort of argument. When they left, Samantha said that she was missing some money and accused one of them of taking it. Laramie would never steal from anybody. Now him, I don't doubt that he did. But Samantha got very upset, started kind of lashing out physically, verbally. They dropped her off, and he was living with Samantha at the time, and they picked up his things and kind of left. He was getting text messages later on from Samantha's father saying he was calling the police, he was going to swear out a warrant for him, and just all kinds of stuff. And so originally, Laramie told me that she was taking him up to Memphis because he had nowhere else to go, and that he had like a half brother or something up there. And then, like the next morning, I get a text message from Laramie of a hotel or a picture of Shreveport, Louisiana, and she said that they had decided to go out to Colorado because he had a friend, an old Army buddy that lived out in Denver, and she was going to take him out there, that he had been in contact with the friend and he could go stay with him. So that's how she ended up in Colorado.
Were you surprised that she was willing to take this guy like all the way out there? That's not like taking someone for a ride across town or a ride to another part of the state. That's pretty far.
Yeah, that's over 1,000 miles. Yes, I was very shocked, very concerned, because she hadn't known him but just a few months. And I had always raised Laramie to be cautious. But she thought she was helping somebody out. And she even joked on the trip, and I'll never forget it. She said, well, because I told her, I said, well, just be careful. Just be careful. And she said, oh, well, Mama. She said, besides, he was in the Army and I got a gun. Because she had been gifted a pistol at Christmas time.
And did she keep that usually around herself for protection?
She did. She did. She would keep it the glove compartment of her car. She kept it in there. She knew how to shoot it. The person that gave it to her was her. He became her ex-boyfriend, but her boyfriend at the time, she was living with him, and his father gave her and him kind of like matching pistols. Hers was pink camouflage, and I don't remember the color of Joseph's, but I just know Laramie's was pink camouflage. And they took her out and practiced with it, teaching her how to shoot and everything. So she was very familiar with it. And yeah, especially after she moved to Orange Beach, she would keep it in the car.
She gets to Colorado, and it seems like she's staying in touch with you the time while she's gone. How long was she there in Colorado, and was she staying in touch with you on a regular basis?
They left August 7th of 2017. That would be the last day I'd ever see Laramie. She would text me pictures, and we talked. We actually talked August 10th. We talked, and I thought they were coming back because they had said there were no warrants out, so I thought they were coming back to Alabama. That was the last conversation I had with her, was August 10th. I get a text message August 11th saying, drop my phone in the water. Well, I get a phone call first, and there's nobody there. And so then I get a text message. I drop my phone in the water. I can only text. And so I would get text messages. And yeah, I thought it was Laramie. I actually had back surgery. I had a lumbar fusion done on August 15th, 2017. And when I woke up, my left leg was paralyzed because the doctor had hit a nerve. Anyway, I texted that to Laramie, and it was like well, how long is that going to last? And I said, yeah, supposedly till the swelling goes down. Anyway, the last text message I got was on August 17th. So I get out of the hospital August 19th, and I texted her out of the hospital, heading to Everett. And that was my fiance at the time, and I was going to recuperate at his home. So didn't hear nothing back. August 20th, me and my son, Coulter, we were talking, and I just knew something wasn't right. The something was off.
Yeah, and you haven't spoken to her. You've texted with who you think was her, but you haven't heard her voice now in a little while.
Right, since August 10th, and this is August 20th. So I had a friend with the Dale County Sheriff's Department, and I told Coulter I was going to call him. And Coulter said, well, I'm going to text the phone and see if she'll, respond. And I was like, okay. So I called Lieutenant Tim Crooks with the Dale County Sheriff's Department. This was on a Sunday, so his day off. I apologized and told him it's personal, and he immediately said, what you got? And I told him everything I knew. At that particular point, I only knew that the guy's first name was David. I didn't know the rest of his name. And so Tim jumped on it, made some calls, and then he called me later on and says, could she be in Arkansas? And I said, well, I guess, because the phone had been communicating with Coulter, and so it pinged at Pinnacle Mountain State Park, and so that's how they found her car. Didn't find her, but they found her car.
And this location where they found her car is exactly where again in relation to your house?
This is Pinnacle Mountain State Park is in Little Rock, Arkansas. So it's about 9.5 hours from here, from my house.
Okay, and this is what, a state over?
Arkansas is
a couple states over.
A couple of states over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's a few states over.
It seemed like maybe at the time that she was heading back to Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, because they, I believe, if I remember correctly, in one of the text messages was that they were going to go a different route back so that they could see some other states. So yeah, she could have been heading back, just going through different states to get back here. So yeah. August 21st, 7:00 in the morning, I will never forget the knock on the door. I was actually laying on the couch because I couldn't stay in bed because my leg hurt so bad. Everett goes to the door. I'm thinking it's home health because I was supposed to start home health that day. They were going to do their intake to get my physical therapy started. So it's 7:00. I'm thinking, why is home health coming this early? But that's all I could imagine. Well, anyway, it was Tim, and he was accompanied by a Bay County Sheriff's deputy. They come in, and he starts telling me about, Laramie's car had been found there at Pinnacle Mountain. Obviously, I knew that. The guy that they had found was David Houston Harvey. She'd been with. He had some outstanding warrants in Pulaski County, Arkansas. That's Jacksonville, Arkansas area. And so he had been arrested. The Arkansas State Police had been called in, and they had questioned him for a significant amount of time. And he took them to Laramie's body. It was at Lake Pittsthorn. And, I'm sorry, I know it's a distance from Pinnacle Mountain State Park. I think Lake Pitthorn is still close to Jacksonville. Well, no, it's Lonoke County because that Lonoke County is who prosecuted him. Anyway, he took them to the spot. She was in a suitcase, and so Tim's telling me all this, and he said that he needed to get Laramie's dental records. He needed me to sign a subpoena to get her dental records and who was her last dentist. So I gave him all that. And he said that the body in the suitcase had red hair. And Laramie had red hair at the time.
It just sounds like, I don't know how long this conversation lasted, but it seemed like it was a lot of news that must have really shocked you. And what were you feeling at that time hearing this information?
I was crushed. I was devastated. I felt like my heart was just gonna just break right in two. I remember letting out of, I don't even know, Everett said it was like a sound he'd never heard, but I just remember kind of a scream, kind of, I guess. I don't know. It was just gut wrenching.
And I imagine, someone hearing that their child is dead, that's got to be the worst news you can hear. But then to hear that, she's dead and in a suitcase, things like that, that's really disturbing.
Oh, it was horrible. And when he told me the person had red hair, I said, oh, so it may not be Laramie. I mean, getting a look glimmer, I hope. And he just looked at me, and I knew that I knew it was her, but she wasn't positively identified until August 22nd. She's Stacy Rhodes with the Arkansas State Police. She actually just got promoted to major with Arkansas State Police. She called me on that August 22nd, and we were talking, and she said, does Laramie have tattoos? And I said, oh, sure. And I described every one of Laramie's tattoos. And she said, could you identify her by a tattoo? Well, could you identify a tattoo if I send you a picture? And I said, sure. And so I get a picture. Laramie had a design on the back of her neck, and there was a scorpion that was crawling down into the middle of the design because Laramie was a Scorpio. And so Stacey sends me that picture, and I was like, yeah, that's her. Come to find out, Laramie had actually been murdered the night of August 10th into August 11th. So that's why the communication had gotten strange.
Because it wasn't really her that was communicating with you.
Right. It was him posing like he was her, trying to say she was still alive. Because when he got to Arkansas, his grandmother lives in Arkansas. So he was raised in Jacksonville, Arkansas. And so when he gets there, he actually goes to Grandma's house. And from my understanding, from everything, from investigators and all, is he told them that Laramie wanted to stay in Colorado, and he wanted to come to Arkansas to Grandma's house. And so she told him, just take the car and go, and I'll just stay here. Makes absolutely no sense. But that was his story when he got to Arkansas.
Not a believable story.
No, not at all. Not at all. And he also told then once he got caught, he told them that Laramie had been asleep. She woke up and pulled the gun on him, and that they struggled with the gun, and it went off and killed her. That's not a plausible story either. Laramie would never have done that. And besides the fact, if that had happened, if it was self-defense, why didn't he stop and call the cops? Why didn't he call the police and say what had happened? And yeah,
just doesn't make sense.
No, he actually, it was his suitcase that she was found in. It's a big black suitcase, so it was his suitcase. He dumped his things out, put Laramie in the suitcase. All of Laramie's things, he admitted that he would stop at dumpsters along the way from Colorado to Arkansas. He would stop at various dumpsters and throw her stuff away. He actually, he kept a laptop, her cell phone, and the gun. And I'm assuming he kept all of Laramie's identification cards as well. Now he hid them at Pinnacle Mountain State Park. When he went up there, he went and he threw the phone and the gun off the top of the mountain at the state park. And then all of Laramie's identification cards, he took them. There's a little creek at the state park, and there's a little walking trail that you can walk down to the creek. Well, he took all of those items and put them under a rock in the creek. They were found in October. So, 2 months later, all of that was found. This lady and her son were out there taking pictures, and the son was playing in the water, and it just happened to turn over this rock and, found all of these items, found all of this. And so the lady was going to send everything back to Laramie. She was going to try to contact her, send everything back. She Googled Laramie's name and found out what happened. So she stopped one of the park rangers and gave him those cards.
So that's a big clue that they found.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show even more that he was trying to cover up what he did.
Sure. And he was originally charged with something to do with transporting and hiding Laramie's body or abuse of a corpse or something along those lines?
Yeah. In Arkansas, he was charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with physical evidence because he threw the gun away. And he actually, and sometime in 2018, I don't remember the month, but in 2018, he did a plea deal, and I was involved with that. The DA kept me very much involved in everything, and so he took a plea deal and got 12 years for those charges.
The 12 years seems like on one hand, it puts him in jail and gets him off the street, but on the other hand, 12 years doesn't seem that long for taking, a 23-year-old's life.
Well, this was only in Arkansas, all they could prosecute him for was abuse of a corpse and the tampering with the evidence. Because, he admitted to the shooting, but he said it took place in Colorado. So they couldn't try him for murder in Arkansas. That had to be Colorado that did that. So he was, even at his sentencing hearing, the DA, John Huggins was his name, the ADA, John Huggins, he said that, because I wasn't there, he said that David Houston Harvey, the judge had asked him a question about did it conceal a murder, and he said yes. So it wasn't until May of 2019 that he was actually indicted for murder in Colorado. So almost 2 years before he got murder charges. And he was indicted on first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and auto theft and theft of property because of the laptop. It took them so long. I had a wonderful investigator on the case with the Colorado Bureau of Investigations. Her name was Stacy Galbraith. She was great. It was just a problem with finding the jurisdiction because he shot her on a road somewhere in Colorado. And so they had to actually pinpoint where that spot was. Stacy kept in touch with me. I probably worried the heck out of her sometimes. But she would present Laramie's case to various counties in Colorado. She was presenting her case to various counties out there, presented her case actually to the feds, and finally, through a lot of digital evidence, a lot of digital work, they were able to say that she was actually killed in Weld County, Colorado. And so that's why it took so long. And so Weld County, Colorado prosecuted him.
Quite an ordeal just to go through and get justice and have him held accountable.
Oh, yes, it was awful. I mean, I was thankful he was in prison in Arkansas, but it was like, okay, are we ever going to get murder charges, ever? And so that was a big relief when they finally got those charges. Oh, it was a lot. Like I said, it was a lot of work on everybody's part, on all the investigators' part. And I've always appreciated everything they did, but a lot of it did go down to the forensic, the digital forensic evidence. It's amazing what they can do with that stuff.
Yeah. And what was his grand total time that he was sentenced to?
He got, in Colorado, 35 years for second-degree murder. Unfortunately, there were some issues with the case, and we couldn't prosecute for first degree. We had to settle for second, and he got 35 years.
Wow. So did he ever admit to the truth about why he did what he did, or did he ever show any kind of remorse for doing it?
No, he hasn't. He actually confessed to his girlfriend, Samantha. She had gone from Orange Beach up to Arkansas because she had family that lived in Arkansas as well. So he met up with her, and he told her that Laramie was asleep and he shot her while she slept. Laramie had a single gunshot wound it was right behind her left ear.
Did he give any explanation of why he did that?
No, he didn't. He didn't tell her why, or I've been in contact with Samantha on Facebook and through text messages, and he never told her why he did it. Best thing that the investigators and even me that we can think of is he wanted Laramie's car to come back to Arkansas, and he thought the best way to get it, I guess, was to get Laramie out of the way. There's so much he could have done. He could have just put Laramie out of the car and took off with it. As long as he had left her phone, I would have gotten her home. Yeah. I didn't find out. He was sentenced in Colorado in September of 2020, and I got to go to a sentencing hearing and give my victim impact statement. Got to meet the ADA, Tony Pratt. Got to meet him, met my victim advocate. She was wonderful. So in talking with Tony, he said that text messages that Laramie had exchanged with somebody in Orange Beach indicated that Laramie was scared that he was going to leave her. Said that in text messages she was even scared to get out and go to the bathroom because she thought he was going to leave her. So maybe she would have refused to get out of the car. I don't know. But Laramie was 5'2" and maybe 115 pounds maybe. So I mean he was a lot bigger than her, is what I'm saying. He could have manhandled her and got her out of the car and took it.
Yeah,
but he chose to end her life.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that he could have done. He could have gotten a bus ticket or something, or as you mentioned, just tied her up and left her someplace and then took the car. And, you can always replace a car, and so you can't replace a person.
Right.
So now you've moved past this chapter. He's in jail. Now I assume that you just want to honor your daughter's memory and not think too much about him, sort of as you mentioned. Where do you go from here? How do you plan to move forward with your life and put this awful chapter behind you while still honoring your daughter's memory?
Yeah, it's really hard. I actually left a job that I had for 15 and a half years, a career I had for 15 and a half years, because I couldn't handle the stress of it anymore. And I'm now a residential coordinator at a group home for intellectually disabled adults. And so that's a very rewarding career in and of itself. I want to get Laramie's story out there because even though she was raised to be cautious, she wasn't in this case. And I just want other young ladies to know, or any age really, that you're never immune to somebody. You think you know somebody and you really don't. So just to always be careful and watch yourself.
Maybe she was too trusting, too kind, she sort of let down her guard a little bit with this person that she let into her life.
Yes, definitely all those things. Yes. I live day to day. I have friends. My son lives in Baltimore, actually. So I've taken a couple of trips up there. Maybe that'll be in my future. He wants me to move up there. You never know. That might happen one of these days.
No. Well, it definitely doesn't seem like something that, is an easy thing to get past. You're in a group of people that have lost a loved one, a child in a violent way. And I think most of us won't know what that experience is like. But I wish you well sort of navigating and moving through life. And I hope you're able to heal as best as you can.
Yes, that it's definitely a process. Definitely a process. And I have a wonderful support group that I'm involved with, friends that I've made that have also had their children taken by murder. So I do have some support, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, it's always good for people that are in your situation to find someone to share with and that can comfort them and maybe provide some advice.
Oh yeah. And I've definitely had that over the years.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing Laramie's story with us. And, I'm glad that you found justice. I know that doesn't bring Laramie back to you, but I'm also happy, as I'm sure you are, that this person is not out on the street to take someone else's daughter from them.
Oh yes, definitely glad he's where he needs to be.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. I'd like to thank Sonny Landon for writing and research assistance in this episode. As we wrap up, I'd like to play a preview for a true crime podcast called Autumn's Oddities. Be sure to give it a listen. We'll be back here soon with an all-new episode of The Murder of My Family, and I hope you'll join me for it. But before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.
Autumn's Oddities is a strange and unusual podcast made by the strange and unusual, me, Autumn Gruby. Each week, I'll be taking you through some of the creepiest cases true crime has to offer. It won't only be true crime, I'll also be covering cryptids, haunted places, haunted things, and the true stories that inspired horror movies. Listen every Monday and Friday for new episodes. And remember, if it's creepy and weird, you'll find it here.